Alright, so when I was thinking of how I wanted to make this video, I was thinking like, well, how do you sort of tell someone what a class is like? And so I came to the conclusion that it would probably be best to just talk about what I thought was the best in the course and in taking AP Bio. So I made a little list, and I'm just going to go through each of those items and talk about why it made AP Bio a good experience for me. So the first thing I had was how the topics sort of fit together and relate to one another throughout the entire year. And like it's even the things that you wouldn't expect. So like you start the year on ecology and then you go to evolution, and like you can totally see like the way those two things combine. But then you go to talking about like biochem, and then it feels like, okay, biochem is the sort of subject that's just gonna sit in the corner while all the other subjects like party with each other and just sort of cry, because biochem is interesting to say the least. But then you find like the different ways the biochemistry of different cells evolved, and then after you're done talking about biochem, then you go to cells, and then the way cells evolved their biochem based on the way they fit into their ecology. It's all just like, it was very sort of interesting and almost fun to see like old stuff coming back up, like the way that cells evolved to even start existing in the first place, and like all of the different theories and hypotheses. Like I first thought that it was just like, oh, okay, so the planet, it got cold, and then it got oxygen, and then, life existed. But it's like way more complicated than that. Like there's this idea of panspermia, which is this concept that life came from outside the Earth in meteorites, and then when those meteorites hit the surface, they would break, and then the tiny little bacteria inside would just move out. So then that would be kind of like, oh, everything on Earth is just an alien then, okay. And then there's like the idea of the RNA world, where all life is built on RNA, like self-replicating RNA. So then even RNA starts to evolve, because like the most successful RNA is able to take up more space and take more nucleic acids to add onto itself and get bigger. So like even non-living things being able to evolve, like it all fit together really nicely. And then also like each of those topics is sort of like its own big topic too. So they're all very multifaceted. So one thing that was so much more complicated than I had ever thought would be was evolution. And I used to think that just like, oh, evolution, it's just like beneficial things become more prevalent, and that's kind of it, but it's very unspecific. We read over the year this book called Survival of the Sickest, which, like, the whole front part of the book was how evolution kind of screwed humanity now because of like past traumas. So, or even current traumas that screw people just because it's kind of unlucky, or a double-edged sword. So the example that I thought was the most interesting was the way that sickle cell anemia actually makes you immune to malaria. So basically, the way that this would work is if you are heterozygous for sickle cell anemia, then you end up with codominant expression of the trait. So you have normal red blood cells and sickle cells. But the great thing about that is that sickled cells can't be infected with malaria. So only, around half your cells can get infected at any time, which isn't going to be enough for malaria to affect you. So you're de facto immune to malaria, even though you have sickle cell anemia. And this sort of brought on the prevalence of sickle cell throughout Africa, because they still, like, that continent still struggles with malaria. And so the people who are able to survive malaria because of that immunity via sickle cell causes sickle cell to be more prevalent inside of their population. So another thing that I really enjoyed about the class was that it's a lot more like problem solving and critical thinking rather than just algorithms. I took AP Chem as well, and I didn't really enjoy that class very much. One, because chemistry just didn't click for me as well as I thought it would, but also like everything was almost too formulaic. Like the way that you solve a problem in AP Chem is that you're given a question, and then you have to think about what the question means. That's the critical thinking part. Like, you definitely still have to do critical thinking in chemistry. It would be ridiculous to suggest otherwise. But yeah, you figure out how you need to find the answer. And then the tricky part is actually just doing the steps necessary to get your answer. Like doing all that math and checking your answers, making sure everything's right. But then in AP Bio, it's kind of different. There's not much math that you do in this class, which I was kind of a fan of. Like, I like math as much as the next person, but at the same time, like, I have almost more fun on bio tests because it's not just so formulaic. Because on a bio test, like especially on the AP test, your questions aren't going to be like you get a diagram and it's what's the name of this cell organelle. It's going to be like, so just using the mitochondria as an example, it's going to give you mitochondria, maybe it'll show you the electron transport chain or something, and it'll be like, okay, so what if this cell or this mitochondrion could not use its electron transport chain? And so it'll be more like, well, okay, what does that mean for the mitochondrion? And then, so you kind of almost already have most of the answer, but you have to sort of piece together how to get there instead. And then the answer lies within sort of trying to solve that problem. So instead of just knowing what a mitochondrion is, or like the number of bones in a body, it's instead knowing like how these things work and like how each part affects each part, which is like almost ironically meta, given that like that's sort of how the whole class works. Each part sort of builds on every other part until you have like this whole complete thing. And so if that sort of stuff seems like appealing to you as a student, and also bonus points if you actually like biology like I do, because, you know, I'm a nerd, then I would definitely consider taking this class, because you'll probably have a pretty good time if, like, the things on that list sound appealing to you. So, that's it, really. Take AP Bio.